Welcome to Co-Opinions. My name is Josh, and today I have Nick on with me.
Hey, Josh.
We are going to do a small episode today, a last-minute alteration into the WarioWare series, a series both Nick and I are very familiar with, and has had an interesting impact, not significant, but it's a fun little quirky series, and let's be frank, the last few episodes you've been on, Nick, have been neither fun nor quirky.
I don't recall any episodes of rape in the WarioWare games, and if there are any, then I really don't want to visit that chapter of WarioWare.
About to say, they say Nintendo isn't just for children anymore, so...
Oh wait, WarioWare touched. There we go.
Oh, God. But on that note... Not on that note even slightly. Switching gears, thank God. Nick, what was the first experience you had with the WarioWare? Let's actually back it up just a step. The WarioWare series. After being an anti-hero to Mario for X amount of years, Nintendo decided, they wanted to do a series of wacky mini-games. And they went, we'll put Wario in these for some reason. Is that how you interpreted it?
Yes.
And so in approximately 2003, the first WarioWare game was released. So from there...
I remember the preview stuff prior to the game coming out, seeing that in Game Informer where you had the screens of like, all right, there's a bomb with a number on it in the bottom of the screen, and someone is holding hands with the dog who is very happy. And I'm not sure what's going on, but this is enough to get me interested. I like dogs, I like Nintendo games.
I like dogs, I like Nintendo games, and I like bombs. So let's see where they're going with this. Interesting gamble, Cotton. Let's see how it pans out.
Did you get that game shortly after it came out? Was WarioWare the first one, Mega Micro Games, the first one you played?
So it was the first one that I played, but I did not purchase it. I remember at the time I wasn't living in the area, and my friend was like, oh, I have this new Wario game. And I started up, I'm like, this is just a bunch of weird mini games. These are actually awesome mini games. So from there, I'm like, I think, I'll give this a shot. And I devoured that first game. There were, like you said, quirky ones where you had to hold hands with animals or line up the fingers so you could pick a nose just right.
I remember another one where it's like you had a little snot booger hanging down from a nose and you had to jam the A button so that the little snot bubble made its way back into the nose.
It was just so unusual for, first off, a Wario game. They just slapped Wario in there. He had no tie into that before then. I got
that game after having some major surgery done for my ear. Actually, I couldn't hear out of an ear, and I used my my parents went ahead and let me use my savings to go ahead and immediately after the surgery get a Game Boy Advance SP along with a couple of games, and that was one of the games. It was kind of the nice little thing to look forward to after having the surgery, which I was nervous for. And I remember feeling very, very awful. There was a lot of blood involved with this. I wasn't in any danger. But it was gross and I felt awful, but I was just so hooked on the game that even with all that pain, I still barely slept because it was like, man, I gotta play more WarioWare. I gotta play more.
It was it had an addictive, almost Twitch kind of gaming because in addition, what it did was it presented X amount of stages for you and you had chances. So you could mess up so many times before you got a game over. After X amount of stages, you were presented with a boss stage. There were usually 3 versions of the boss stage that got progressively more difficult as you went on. If you completed the boss stage, you got an additional chance back. I believe up to a max of 3, but I could be wrong there. And for the most part, the first time you played through, they introduced you to a ton of auxiliary characters that have not really existed outside the series other than that. But you had to get up to the boss stage the first time you played through. And once you did that, you'd completed the character. And you could go back and you could play endlessly. And as you beat... It wasn't just when you beat the boss stages. After you kept progressing, it would say speed up and everything would go faster. And it'd just be so crazy and hectic.
You eventually got to a point where the music was almost incomprehensibly fast-forwarded. Especially, this is jumping ahead a little bit, but I know in WarioWare Twisted, then you had a game where the only goal was not to rotate or do the twisting movement at all. So I went ahead and I remember I was curious what happened if you got to 999 beatings of a single stage. And I just queued that up and set my Game Boy down and was like, all right, time to go do something else. And then coming back later and it's still going and it's just being like, da-da-da-da, and then seeing it just... It was like having the same 5 seconds in loop on my little Game Boy screen. I was just like, this is unseemly. I'm gonna lose the game. I'm worried I'm opening a portal to hell.
This is a living nightmare. And then Wario's hand comes out and you're like, whoa!
It's like a scene from A Clockwork Orange with your eyes pried open.
Dark. Very dark. Now, one thing I didn't realize about this at the time, and somehow I do remember it, so I don't know where I'm drawing these memories from. This game was re-released on the GameCube in a party game format. Now, I've seen Let's Plays of this online, and it looked like it would have been riotous fun, but were you aware of this either?
Nope.
So the idea behind the GameCube release of it was that there were up to 4 players, and one person was trying to complete the micro games, at least in one mode, and the other 3 players picked one of these random auxiliary characters and tried to block the screen. So if you were playing a mini game where you had to get this little bug to avoid getting squished by the ceiling, you may or may not remember that, the idea would be just block all of where they could avoid being squished by. So it seemed like an awesome mix of being irritating but so quick that you couldn't get mad at any one particular person because it kept cycling through everybody. So that seems like it would have been a lot of fun, but it was a brand new series on a system that did not do great at the time. So the next one I want to bring up some interesting trivia about. The next 2, actually, which are WarioWare Twisted, which I have not played, but Nick has, and WarioWare Touched. So these 2 games had a weird release schedule. Both came out in 2004, but it came out in Japan, Twisted, then Touched, where Twisted came out in October and Touched came out in December. However, in North America, the Touched came out first in 2005 in February, and then it came out in Twisted came out in May of 2005. So a Game Boy Advance iteration of this series came out after a DS version did, which was very strange to me. So let's talk about the quote-unquote canonically first one that I have nothing to go off of here. This is all you, Nick. I know that this is one of 2 games I recall trying to use like gyroscopic sensors to affect gameplay. The other was a Kirby game I never played, one of the few I haven't played. So what was your opinion of this particular one?
Well, I think Twisted was definitely one of the weaker ones in the series. I mean, certainly not weaker than that final one that we got on the Wii U where they just slapped the label on it. But the gyrometer, is that the correct word for this?
Gyroscope, I think, is what I would go with.
The gyroscope there, I personally found it a little bit too sensitive where it was kind of difficult to play, where you had to keep just a perfect posture, and that kind of pulled me from the experience a little bit. You had some neat games about it. I remember there's one where you basically have someone in tights, Wario basically in tights with a kind of an odd, he's not quite I thought he should be fatter. It's like they're trying to make him look like a sleek dancer, but you still have the little beady Wario nose and the mustache. And there's like these little dancers, and they're all basically just holding up like they're holding up Game Boys, and then they're twisting their arms right to left and hopping around. And you basically have to go ahead and follow the pattern. You're one of Wario's backup dancers.
Oh, of course.
So and that's the boss fight, is that you need to go ahead and mirror the patterns, otherwise he's going to get mad at you because you're not being a good backup dancer. So you had neat situations like that. But on the whole, the controls were enough that for the other games, you'd find yourself going back and playing them just to see, hey, maybe I can beat my old high score. I didn't really do much of that with Twisted.
And that was something that was one of the reasons I never personally got around to even being interested in it. In addition, for it being a system, don't get me wrong, you could play Game Boy Advance games on the DS, but I was pretty much done with the Game Boy Advance once I got my DS. And it seemed like all the games pretty much were stuck on one gimmick, which that was almost antithetical to the first game where it's like, well, now you're doing this weird thing. Well, now you're doing this weird thing. Well, now you're doing this. It was always, well, you're turning your Game Boy in some weird way.
I think they got a little obsessed. I mean, you see that with each iteration where it focuses on, we have this new hardware thing that we can go ahead and do. Let's do a bunch of goofy tech demos around this new hardware thing. And I think they would have done a better job just trying to embrace the weirdness of it. And I personally wouldn't have minded if we just got a WarioWare 2 and it was just even goofier, more mini games. I'd be like, sold, here's my money.
and done. But this is where the next game, are you cool with Twisted?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. The next game is the one I hands down put the most time into, and that'd be WarioWare Touched. And this was, I have a standing rule of you have to be able to buy 3 games for a system before you purchase the system, because I've been burned before looking at you, Sega Saturn. And this has served me well. This was one of the games that did it for me, and part of the reason I sunk so much time into this was right after high school, I went on a long trip to the Southwest to a place that bored me out of my skull. So I played this to death. And I got gold on every mini game. I got high score on everything. But it was because it was good. I actually really liked it. And the 3DS had a lot of, you'd mentioned accurately before that they got obsessed with the new fun hardware iterations. And the 3DS had a lot of stuff. In addition to the touchscreen, they also made use of the sleep mode, I think, for some of them. The dual screens, that was taken advantage of. They tried to use the microphone, unfortunately, which I'm glad they've gotten away from that with systems.
I think the only thing the microphone was really used for, at least, was blowing into it, which is a nice contrast to Feel the Magic XYXX, where you had a mini game in that one where you had to yell as loud as you could to try and get someone's attention. I was told I needed to start playing that as a garage game by my parents when I tried that one as a kid.
I vaguely remember you saying that they heard you screaming up in your room.
My dad thought that I had tipped over a bookcase on me and like I was trapped and couldn't get up.
That's amazing. I mean, well, it's amazing you weren't trapped under a bookcase. But I sunk an enormous amount of time into this, and the games were just fun. And I feel like this game, it didn't give a story to it, but it gave the idea behind, Wario wants to cash in on the 3DS. It tied into his greed in a really entertaining way, because this series completely de-villainized Wario. After he started riding a motorcycle and eating onions, like he wasn't a bad guy anymore.
Just a quick point of order, it was the DS, not the 3DS for this one.
My bad.
With that, I think my favorite minigame on Touched. I want to agree with what you were saying about how this seemed to be the perfect sequel, and that they expanded and did fun stuff with the goofy characters they had in the first game. You had a bunch more minigames. They had a lot of new gimmicks that they could utilize with the different hardware functionality that was available. And I also feel like they ratcheted up the weirdness even more so. The best example in my mind being what I believe was the final boss, where you are a cave explorer Wario, and you walk into this cave, and what you find out is that you're basically exploring Wario's nose as a little mini Wario. You have to cut down the little nose hairs that are blocking the path. You have to go ahead and tap to get rid of the nasal leakage, which is being shot at you. And then at the end, you basically just tap away, I think, at a giant booger to go ahead and clear this rock rubble so that you can go ahead and get a treasure, which I don't. Was it just a bulb of garlic? Do you remember what treasure he finds in his nose?
I don't remember what the treasure was, but I do remember that wasn't the end of the level.
Yep. And then at that point, then you have the all this irritation has really started the nasal work. So now you have a waterfall of snot that you were trying to outrun.
Indiana Jones style. Like that was, I still remember that because that was a significant. The boss stages always went from micro games to mini games because these actually became involved. And the weirdness, it permeated every one of these worlds because there was the cyborg guy, the doctor's cyborg guy who was trying to build a bunch of weird machines. Then you were also playing as, was she a delivery driver?
Mona, yep.
Mona the delivery driver, or the twins Kat and Anna, which I don't remember how long it took me to figure out that was just Katana. But I'm like, oh my god, that's actually so clever.
And I don't know about you, but 9-volt was part of the thing that got me into it. The idea of doing micro games around old Nintendo games I had grown up with, that was a blast. And I would love to see more of that. Like, I would enjoy that. Go ahead and put that out for the Switch with 16-volt doing 16-bit micro games.
Well, and I think that would segue well into talking about how this has impacted our approach to the legacy of this, as we'll bring this up later, like NES Remix and Rhythm Heaven, that kind of thing. But that'll be for later. Touched, I I really don't have enough nice things to say about it because I really did just love this iteration.
Same as you. That was a game I played to death. It was the perfect one just have in your back pocket to play for a few minutes and see if you could beat your old high score.
I think that Penny Arcade may or may not have attributed that best game to play in between breaths, WarioWare Touch, and I can't agree with it more. But after that, the next game to come out, and I'm not going to say this starts the downtrend of the WarioWare games, but there's not a lot left after this, was WarioWare Smooth Moves for the Wii. Now, this game was good, but I felt like it didn't live up to its potential because it's basically indicative of how I felt about the Wii in general. It didn't live up to its potential because for all the really interesting things that could have been done with the hardware, what it always boiled down to was waggle the Wii remote. There was one game in particular in Smooth Moves that really I thought was the closest to capturing the idea behind what made them wacky. The idea was you were supposed to hold your Wii remote and the idea was go base jumping. So what you were supposed to do to pass it was drop your Wii remote. Now this was contingent on the fact that you had the wrist strap on. So when it felt it drop, the little guy jumped you could see what was supposed to be your wrist strap get taut behind him. The idea was your little guy jumped. And I thought that was actually a unique mini game. But pretty much everything else was how do you waggle the remote? And the games were never super long, but because they tried to create more of a story, it didn't have the same zany wackiness. I remember that I bought it when it came out because I went, man, I love Touched. So I want to buy Smooth Moves. And I bought it and I beat it in a night. And you, correct me if I'm wrong, you asked, well, what do you think? I go, just borrow mine.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts?
That was about it. It didn't really leave much of an impression with me. I mean, to your point, all the minigames seem to be some variation of Waggle. I feel like they tried to split it into different modes, but operationally it didn't really stick.
And what I was a little disappointed in was I saw that this game was developed by Intelligent Systems, not by Nintendo, but Intelligent Systems also designed Touched. So there's not really an excuse for why this one was so lackluster in my mind.
I think Intelligent Systems in general, though, has a history of having some really great games and then some that are just decidedly average if you look at critical reception for them as a development studio.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, this one, looking at the brief breakdown, players must hold the Wii remote in different positions to play the minigames. You can't do that for 4 hours.
If Motion Plus had been a thing, if they had been developing around Motion Plus, I think we could have seen some really interesting stuff, but we weren't, so it was Waggle City.
Yeah, and I want to talk more about it, but all I have is disappointment, to be frank, which is a different kind of disappointing, because, yeah, this is kind of where they started to go downhill. There's no two ways about it. Because I don't believe either of us played the next two, which are WarioWare Snapped. You did not play, correct?
Nope.
And WarioWare Do It Yourself. So with Snapped, the idea behind it was for the DS, DSiWare specifically, the criminally underutilized, I don't want to say shareware, but like downloadable game service for the DS. Was it only DSi?
It was only DSi. That was their introduction to it. And the one notable thing you did have come out of that was Shantae's Risky's Revenge.
Boom. Which then got upgraded to a deluxe version we can play on consoles now. But it brought Shantae back, which we never played the first one, so we can't be Anyways, neither here nor there. Anyways, with WarioWare Snap, the idea behind it was you were able to take pictures of yourself or you use the camera to control the minigames. And the DSiWare platform in general was heinously underrepresented, underutilized, and I remember when Snapped came out, I just didn't hear anything good about it. And you had a DSi because I think your DS just...
My DS's battery had died and I was curious what was going to come out of the DSi thing. It was kind of interesting where Nintendo wasn't doing an actual cell phone, but they were trying to go in that direction of we're going to have an app store and there's going to be a camera in this.
And nothing. Didn't feel it. So it didn't get good reviews. You didn't play it. I didn't play it. It again was something built solely around a gimmick that there's not much to say here. And unfortunately, the next bit, again, WarioWare title, do it yourself. The idea here was solid, the platform was not, and from my understanding, the execution was not.
This seems like one of those things. This seems like one of those ideas that really calls for the ability to share the best content in a way that's easy to find for people. And I don't believe that they had those capabilities built into it from what I remember hearing with reviews.
Yeah, this was on the DS and WiiWare. So not DSiWare, but WiiWare. WiiWare was at least a little better represented. Not super great, but better than DSiWare. And I believe the idea of creating and sharing your own custom levels, whatever, that was done much, much better in Super Mario Maker years later. But this was an idea that was too ambitious and not put together enough at the time, which was disappointing because on paper, make and share your own levels. How awesome does that sound?
Great.
The execution, though, just it apparently was not there, which was incredibly disappointing. So, again, I didn't play it, you didn't play it. The reviewer said the tools just aren't here to make this truly unique. You can't make something that really evokes the spirit of WarioWare when you're cobbling together previous ideas of WarioWare. It just becomes a weird remix game at that point. And that brings us to what is the last game, and as of now, it's been the biggest gap, released in 2013, Game & Wario. It was described as a spiritual successor to the WarioWare series, which is great because as a WarioWare game, it was garbage. It was a bunch of, at this point, it was just mini games. It wasn't even micro games. It was a collection of weird mini games, like I think there was a Sudoku, and maybe you could put together puzzles. I know we rented it when the Wii U came out, and I couldn't justify purchasing this game. It just wasn't good. And I wanted it to be good so bad. Did you borrow this from me too, or did you play it at my place?
I think so. Did you end up getting it?
I got it as a gift because the family tells me, you need more stuff for the holidays. I'm like, well, I could get this. I put it at the very bottom of my list. And one of my more slacker, not quite in-laws was like, oh, look, here's on here, and I can buy this at Walmart on December 23rd, so I'll just get that. Like, great.
You should make your relatives uncomfortable and put, like, male enhancement products on your wish list.
I thought you were going to say put male enhancement products in their stocking, and I'm like, that would be a different kind of uncomfortable. Did you play this game at my place, or did you borrow it from me, or what?
Played it at your place.
And was your snap judgment pretty much the exact same?
I played it one time at your place, and I never touched it again. I didn't even want to borrow it to take home.
It was bad. I would love to try and beat around the bush here, but it was bad. It didn't utilize all the Wii U's really It tried to use the Wii U's interesting functions, like it tried to use, there was a mini game where you deflected things that were being thrown at you by holding up the Wii U gamepad. It tried to use the camera so you could like take pictures of candid moments around a city, but the execution just wasn't there. Like at best, some of the mini games were okay, which unfortunately that came out in 2013. So
5 years gone now.
5 years gone, but this gives us a good segue into how this has opened up our horizons to similar wacky things, because from this series, another, and I'll be very brief on this one because this is all me, not you, though you have played some of them a bit, was the Rhythm Heaven games. And the first one I officially played was on the DS, and it was very, very hard. There's no two ways about it. Because my as-of-then girlfriend at the time was like, oh, it involves rhythm. I should be great at this. And she wasn't, so it was just on me to play it, and I loved it to death.
What's interesting there to me is that you have the WarioWare games where it's very accessible, easy for anyone to get into. And then from there, the idea being, hey, let's go ahead and make the difficult. Let's do this except make it difficult and musical.
Yeah, but it was still, if you could hit the rhythm, the games were super fun. I mean, you've seen me play some of them before, and when they're well executed, they're a blast. But unfortunately, those games have kind of faded out recently, but they continued the wackiness mixed in with awesome music made by apparently a very well-known Japanese artist who I've never heard of outside of these games, but I'm also not in Japan, so who knows? But that, after WarioWare, I became way more open to the idea of, well, even if it's kind of weird and it doesn't make a lot of sense, I should give this a shot. So, like with Rhythm Heaven, I decided to give it a shot. It was, again, at one point in the first game, near the end, you're playing ping pong in space as aliens. Okay, why not? And that was just a lot of fun. There was a mini game where you played as a ninja dog who had to slice up vegetables and at one point tires. Also awesome. You had to deflect alien spaceships that were coming into a certain beat. Amazing. This kind of makes me want to go back and replay the Rhythm Heaven series because those games were amazing. So, but didn't you have a similar series that you were more accessible to?
Sure. So there's Feel the Magic XYXX. That was another game for the DS that came out right around launch. That one was created by Sega. And in that one, you were basically a dude who was just kind of a black silhouette who had like this little blue, who had this blue hair was the kind of style that was going on. He was trying to woo this girl. And you had these guys who were basically trying to help you out to help you woo this girl. And you had a lot of bizarre obstacles. So that anecdote that I mentioned before where you had to yell on the microphone as loud as you can, that's an example of one of those. A lot of the others were just of that variety, but what I really liked there was creating a unified story. I mean, you had a lot of really bizarre reasons why your character wasn't working out with this girl. The series is worth pulling up some video of just for how bizarre it gets. But this was this wasn't long. It was only a few hours long, but they were able to tie together enough of these little micro minigame type things to make that happen. And that's what I think is really interesting is this was just a single player game. And if you think about what we got exposed to before, it's entirely possible that there are other mini games out there prior to Mario Party. I'm sure there's something, but that was the first one that I experienced, and it was billed as being very much this is a game you play with your friends. This is a multiplayer experience. Both WarioWare and WarioWare kind of shifted the direction of that for me to say, hey, this idea is feasible as well if you want to just play at home to decompress, unwind.
I would agree with that. And so it actually accomplished both things to me. Because while you could play it at home to decompress, they also really got your blood pumping when you were playing in endless mode and you just wanted to see how far you could go. I mean, when you got up to like 50, as you mentioned before, it got insane, but after a certain point, you just were in the zone and you could feel it. And that was a lot of fun. And
the excitement of that, especially when you get to the games that would kind of flip the script on you. So like the ones with the microphone where you weren't supposed to blow in. Stuff like that where it's don't press the A button. It's like, oh God. And that I'm sure you as well got a game over at one point because you jammed the button. You're just like, ah!
Oh, you got me, WarioWare. Yeah, I would agree with that. It was... I don't want to make this a bummer thing because I think they could bring it back easily. I mean, the Switch, that would be a great console because they tried to do something similar with that. Did you ever try was it 1-2 Switch?
I haven't tried that.
Don't. It's really bad. It's a glorified tech demo that they tried to attribute lackluster minigames to. What they should have done is made a new WarioWare game that did the exact same thing, but did it as wacky. I'm hoping we see that. I'm hoping there's a WarioWare Switch that gets announced, and because, my God, the Switch would be awesome for it. You have the HD Rumble in one, you have the gyroscope if you undock it, I think. Does it have a gyroscope? I can't remember. It has a touchscreen, I know it has that, and it's got the little NFC if they could figure out some way. There's so many little technical things that they could utilize to make a new WarioWare game on it really amazing.
And they could roll out an entire line of amiibos for it. Come on, Nintendo. You know you want that amiibo cash.
There we go. I mean, you're lacking in the amiibo department currently, other than your $30 Detective Pikachu. So get on it there. Monetized. But anyways, is there anything else you would like to add about this series, Nick?
Nope.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Josh.
Let us know if you played this series. Did you play some other mini micro game series that really has a special place in your heart? Did you think WarioWare was trash? Let us know. But until next time, my name is Josh, and this is Co Opinions.